Hi, good morning, everybody. Giles here from Jobtrain, and welcome to the third of our Jobtrain How Talent sessions. This morning, we're going to be talking all about values and specifically going through a case study from one of our own Jobtrain clients, Birmingham Hippodrome. Before we start, I hope you're all well and enjoying this beautiful sunny spring morning we've got. Shame we can't get out in it too much, but I hope you're getting out in a bit and you're all keeping sane as well. So just before I get started, I'd love questions from you during the course of this session. And if you do have any, then please feel free to hit this Ask the Questions button at the bottom as we go through. And yeah, we're happy to answer all and any of your questions. So I'm going to get started on this morning's presentation with a few slides and things, and hoping my mum's broadband holds up as we go through. But yeah, I hope you enjoy it and hopefully chat to you in a little bit. Okay, right. Delivering a show-stopping values-based recruitment experience. So yeah, story all about our client, Birmingham Hippodrome. So yeah, let's get the show on the road. Right, so Birmingham Hippodrome, if you don't know, it is a really popular single auditorium theatre. They welcome about 500,000 people each year, but they have just 460 people that support all of their shows and all the backstage activity that supports the business and the organisation. And they recruit a real variety of roles, including permanent roles, everything from stage managers, makeup artists, set designers, you name it. But they also recruit an awful lot of volunteers that work for Birmingham Hippodrome, but also they have internships as well. Bit of a fun fact for you. Hippodrome was the ancient Greek stadium for horse racing and chariot racing. The name's derived from the Greek word hippos for horse and dromos. So sadly, nothing to do with hippos at all, but fun fact. So Birmingham Hippodrome celebrated 120 years last year, and they've got really strong values. In headline terms, unforgettable performance, powered by you. But then they have these 3 brand values. So everybody's welcome, nothing but the best, and do it with flair. Really, really like these, really strong, and they really resonate as well. So when they came to look at how they were going to revisit, transform their recruitment process, they had 3 key aims. The first was looking at the candidate experience, and that was right from the point of initial experience, application, right the way through to include onboarding as well. But revolutionizing and changing this recruitment experience was not just specifically to give candidates a better experience, but also hiring managers as well. And finally, they wanted to place the spotlight, a little pun there, a little play on words, on insights and reporting so they could make better data-driven decisions. So before they started on this journey in terms of implementing recruitment technology, they had some of these issues, and some of these may be familiar to some of you. So they had a web-based form for their applications, but they weren't very successful. Sometimes they failed. They had some email-based forms, but sometimes they didn't come through. They were lost in the process. They didn't even sort of have basic acknowledgements to applications as well. And it's a sad fact that actually a lot of people these days aren't sending acknowledgements out to applications. I know from my own wife's recent job hunting experience that she probably only actually had acknowledgement to about 15% of the applications she made. But it was also, when acknowledgements did come out, or they were able to send them out, they were quite impersonal. There was no real expectation setting. It was just a simple, if you haven't heard back from us in 20 days, you probably haven't been successful. So clearly quite a lot to change and improve within the process. And it was similarly frustrating for hiring managers as well. So the job approval process quite often took weeks for it to go through and for roles to be approved. The applications themselves, when they were received, were forwarded or even printed off for hiring managers. So firstly, there was wastage in terms of paper. Secondly, it was quite a laborious process. And thirdly, from a GDPR perspective, there were real concerns around that as well. But they also only had one application form for all the different variety of roles that they recruited for. So it didn't matter if it was somebody working within the back office function or somebody that's working as a set designer, they all had the same application form, and that just didn't work. And the application forms themselves, because they were trying to capture information for all the different roles they're recruiting for, were really long, and they had a real problem with application drop-off and candidates simply abandoning the process. When they did receive application forms and they're going through the screening process, shortlisting was taking a really, really long time. 100 applications would take about a whole day to filter through, and a lot of the shortlisting they did have was based on emails and paper-based. There wasn't a central place where everybody could collaborate on shortlisting, and quite a lot of the time information was lost as well. And as we highlighted before, candidates that weren't successful just didn't hear back, and that wasn't a great experience when you look at the strong brand they have and the values they have and the emphasis they have on giving their customers, a fantastic experience. And they had some feedback that deliver back to candidates, but again, that was all on paper-based forms, and quite a lot of the time they didn't receive that feedback from hiring managers once they'd done their own screening. And when you look at the back end of the recruitment process, and we look at the offers and contracts of people that were successful, they were really big packs of bulky information that were difficult to work through. They were paper-based, so they were sent out in the post, which incurred quite a lot of costs. There was lots of margin for error in terms of them not being received, no real visibility in terms of how new hires were getting on and completing that information. And they were returned on the new starter's first day, but there wasn't any further sort of contact or engagement with new hires from the point of them receiving an offer and then its offer pack in the post to their first day on board. So the goals here were quite clear, really. They really wanted to deliver a more customer-focused experience that matches the same world-class experience that they come to for when people actually come to the theatre. And these were the main goals they had. So it was improving communication, reducing speed to apply, a more relevant experience as well to reduce drop-off, increase the relevance of the application forms they had for the different role types they're recruiting for and the wide variety of role types they're recruiting for. Making sure that they had some screening in place as well. So they were asking the right questions at the right point in the recruitment process. And what they also wanted to do was to ensure that they were attracting and hiring greater diversity as well. And they wanted to try and achieve this by reducing unconscious bias, to have a more inclusive process overall. And at the back end of the process, they really wanted to fix the problems around onboarding and deliver, a real winning experience around onboarding. So right at the very start of the project, this great Covey quote, seek first to understand and then be understood. So what they did was they wanted to make sure that they were, first of all, designing a process that worked for everybody, so for all stakeholders, not just HR and recruitment. So what they sought to do was to create a user group of different stakeholders across the organization, and then define their requirements with input from all of these people. They conducted a series of surveys, they had face-to-face meetings as well. And once they reimagined their recruitment process, they also took a position of flexibility and pragmatism, and accepted that some of those processes might need to be changed or tailored a little bit, depending upon the ATS or the recruitment technology that they implemented. So then they defined their tender requirements before they went out to the market and asked people what technology they had and how it could help solve the specific challenges or problems or achieve the objectives that they had. And they completely redesigned the recruitment process to help better communicate exactly what they were looking to achieve. Now, what they found was, in reality, when they did choose Jobtrain as a product, very little had to be changed. And the process in terms of implementation was probably about 12 weeks. 12 weeks because it's not just about the setup of the technology, but it gave them plenty of space and time to consider the process they'd outlined at the outset of the project and make sure that the realization of that within the technology was as they wanted. So loads of opportunity to review, tweak, change, amend, but also ensure that they were constantly involving the different stakeholders that they'd formed together at the start of the process. And then ultimately got to a process that was consistent. And this is how we do recruitment at Birmingham Hippodrome. So there were 7 key changes to the candidate experience. And ultimately that portal attracts about 2,500 visitors a month. So they wanted to make sure that it was really clear, really informative, conveyed all the information about the experience of working at Hippodrome they wanted to, but that it was reliable, but also it was secure as well in terms of handling personal information. Now, critically, they recognised that a lot of job seekers now start their job search journey using a mobile device. So they needed to make sure that the solution was made for mobile. And they wanted to make sure that the experience for everybody, not just candidates, was really transparent, so that candidates would know exactly what was happening each and every stage of the process. So really clear expectations set about what was going to happen next, and critically, when. So they implemented a full sort of self-service experience for candidates, not just at the application stage, but also so that candidates could book themselves in for interview online really easily, again, using mobiles, but also that onboarding experience, rather than being paper-based and something that they complete in isolation, could also be completed online as well. And to make sure that their values were supported throughout that candidate experience, they made sure that all of their comms at every single stage in terms of emails that went out and what have you, that they were personalized to each and every individual applicant. And they went through quite a thorough process of reducing the application form length, challenging themselves on the information they were collecting application stage, and making sure that each and every application form, was really relevant. And what they also did was they implemented a 2-stage application process. So they collected just the bare bones or the core information they really needed at first stage, so it wasn't onerous. And then they could always come back and ask candidates that were successful after the initial application stage for further information later on. So, bit of a random picture here. We've got some ducks, and we've also got a bunch of text on the right hand side that explains every single part of that picture. And I guess what I'm looking to convey here is that ultimately images and rich media convey so much more information than text can alone. And this is really critical for Birmingham Hippodrome. So they implemented what we call here media-rich job adverts. So they included not just images to convey an idea, an impression about the organisation, but also to include video as well. And they also, coming back to a point before, made sure the application forms are relevant. And they critically removed education from the application form itself because they didn't want to introduce unconscious bias, and they wanted to really focus on assessing candidates based on their fit and values. They really challenged themselves on the application form itself. They went through and completed application forms to make sure that each and every application form at the first stage was kept to 2 minutes or under, because over half those applications were expected to come in via mobile, and that's actually increased since last year now, so it's significantly more. And they introduced a values-based scoring assessment for each and every role that they had, so that they were collecting relevant information. They were scoring based on values and fit rather than other components of the application. And from a hiring manager experience, they gave them access to the ATS, to Jobtrain, and they made sure that they had access to everything that they needed, but nothing that they didn't need. So it wasn't an overwhelming experience, but then they had one go-to place for all of their recruitment activity. And they spent a lot of time looking at exactly what hiring managers did have access to make sure that it was intuitive for them, it was relevant, that they could very easily raise new jobs for approval and make sure that there are real-time updates throughout that process. But they also supported the ATS or Jobtrain with lots of video guides as well that were easy for hiring managers to follow, even if they were picking up or accessing Jobtrain for the first time in 3-4 months and they perhaps forgotten a thing or two. There was always information accessible. But also making sure that there was some support both from the team within Birmingham Hippodrome, but also from Jobtrain as well. So there was always somebody that they could reach on the end of a phone. So when it came down to selection and assessment, sort of post-application, they're quite progressive. They have introduced anonymous shortlisting to, as far as possible, eliminate potential unconscious bias in the review process. They reveal candidate identities sort of post-shortlisting and interview stage. They use a star rating system to make sure they're reducing the initial shortlisting time. And they also introduced panel shortlisting to ensure even fairer assessment. So they would have a panel of people who would all go through and review applications and then input their own scores and feedback against every application. They also used a feature to produce candidate packs ahead of interviews to make sure that interviewing managers or anybody on an interviewing panel had access to all the information they needed for each and every interview. And they also introduced further self-service for candidates that could be used via mobile, so that it was basically a customer-first approach in terms of flexibility and accessibility for candidates. And when it came to the onboarding experience, they recognized that if they were simply sending out offer packs in the post and there was no further real engagement with new hires, then they could potentially risk losing maybe a third of people who might continue to look for roles because there just wasn't that level of engagement or surety about the role. There's a bit of a black hole there. And the simple fact is that at least 10% of people do accept other roles between accepting a new job and starting a new role as well. So they wanted to try and make sure that they were covering that off and making sure that people felt welcomed even before they joined the organization. So they covered off the compliance bit, which is, right to work and all the necessary boring bits and pieces. But what they wanted to address was the other 3 C's, if you like, of onboarding. So it's making sure that they made connections with new hires. They provided some context in terms of what it was going to be like when they joined the organization, and making sure that they introduced and conveyed their own culture before people joined as well. So really welcoming people to the team. So where they are at now is that they've now got all of their onboarding online. So there's no paper-based element to it at all. They've got full self-service for all their new hires. They can access everything online and complete everything online using online forms and that kind of stuff, e-signatures. All of that can be done. It can be tracked as well. So there's transparency for new hires, transparency for the HR team, but also the hiring managers get access to elements of that onboarding so they themselves can see and have some visibility to how their new hires are getting on through the onboarding process. And it goes without saying that by bringing everything online, all of that postage cost is gone and all of that wastage in terms of paper has also been eliminated from the process. So they've also added around the sort of, the 3 C's of connection, context and culture. They introduced an element of our solution at Jobtrain called Green Room. So the idea about Green Room is it's a place where you can provide a bit more of a rich media experience that talks a lot more about their experience when they join the organization, so they can congratulate people, celebrate the fact they're joining the organization, hopefully convey and instill a sense of belonging even before they start on their first day, that they have an opportunity to connect and engage with people within Birmingham Hippodrome. And hopefully reduce some of that first day anxiety about, where do I go? What do I wear? How am I going to get there? Where can I get lunch? Those kinds of things. And make sure that people are really clear on, information about the first day and what they need to bring with them. And the numbers are quite clear in terms of the outcomes from this. So by getting all of this right, they can potentially reduce time to settle by about a third. They can increase retention by as much as 82%. And because people feel more settled, because they feel more prepared before they join the organization, they can actually increase productivity by quite a lot, and by up to about 70%. So here is the green room. So a little bit of a look-see at the green room experience for Birmingham Hippodrome. So they've got a welcome from Holly, the hiring manager here, or the new manager. They can visit the site, they can visit and connect with Birmingham Hippodrome on LinkedIn, on Glassdoor as well. There's links through to latest news and critically key contacts as well. So they can see who they can contact with an HR, who to contact with a recruitment. They've got video guides as well and lots of rich media context to give people more information about when they start. And also, critically, information ahead of the first day. So when to arrive, what to wear, where to get lunch, how they can get there, all those types of things are all within there. And they can actually tailor this experience to different groups of hires as well, so that everybody gets a tailored experience. So yeah, this has really helped them in terms of making sure that people are welcomed even before they start. So the old Drucker adage, what gets measured gets managed. So reporting is really critical for them. And they had a huge black hole of reporting, a dearth of reporting, but which they've managed to address by implementing, one platform. So straight off, by getting their application experience right and reducing that time to complete and reducing attrition, they actually saw an increase of 222% of applications. They've also managed to double the number of starters they have from an ethnic minority using things like blind shortlisting, removing education, all those types of things. And they've provided a much clearer experience for applicants. So they saw a massive reduction in candidates that needed help. And they've also now experienced a reduction in time to hire by about 15 days. Now, more than that, if you look at the sources, this is quite interesting. This will have evolved a little bit over the last 12 months, but 50% of the applications they've received came direct to their career site. 15% came via Google for Jobs, which, as you'll be aware, is an entirely free source. But we also provide posting to Indeed and Facebook, and 11% of candidates came from Indeed, and a pretty significant number came from Facebook as well. Now, we're further supporting that insight and that data as well with a new insights dashboard that they'll have on their new platform, which we are migrating them over to a little later on this year. So the overall outcomes and the learnings for them were that they experienced significantly improved communication. They reduced speed to apply by a huge degree, and keeping apply to at least under 2 minutes. The relevancy application form increased. It wasn't bloated with information that just wasn't relevant for different groups that are applying or different types of candidates. They asked the right questions at the right time, which helped them to understand candidates' potential fit in terms of values. They reduced a lot of the unconscious bias in the process, and they managed to hire a more diverse group of talent into their organization. And ultimately, the candidate experience as a whole, and specifically onboarding experiences, increased and improved vastly. So what's next for them? Well, in terms of how we're supporting Birmingham Hippodrome, we've got an all-new platform that's being rolled out to our customers right now. And what we did when we started that project is we first of all went out to our customers and we asked them for their own feedback on our platform. And as part of that, we've introduced 75 enhancements in direct response to customer feedback that we've had. We've introduced a new insights dashboard, which includes a lot more metrics, including things like hiring funnel, potential bottlenecks in the recruitment process, really useful insights as soon as you come into the platform. We're about to roll out a new hiring manager app as well. So conscious of the hiring manager experience, and now increasingly a lot of us, as we move out of this current environment and into the new world, if you like, a lot of us are probably going to be working from home or on the go a lot more. So we have a new mobile app that's being rolled out specifically for hiring managers and for recruiters on the go. And we've also, within the platform that Birmingham Hippodrome will use, is introducing our new chatbot, Howard. So named, funny enough, like our house sessions, to help on Wednesdays. So Howard's there to help answer questions, to automate tasks, to give direction, really to help around user happiness, engagement, and confidence within the platform as well. So that's the presentation for this morning. I hope it's been helpful for you, not just in terms of seeing how somebody else has used recruitment technology, but also reassessed their own processes to support their own values. There's a lot in there this morning, but also I hope that some of it will provide some useful hints and tips that perhaps while we're in a period of relative downtime, we might be able to introduce some enhancements to your process. I'd love to answer any questions if anybody has them. Oh, I'm just going to have a quick read through. Yeah, what was included in the 2-minute application? The bare bones of information, really. It was basic contact details. The candidate was invited to upload a CV, but they also completed those values-based assessment questions. And really the focus was placed on that more than anything else. And it was only the HR team that had access to CVs. So again, it could remove the unconscious bias element. There's a second stage application form that comes later that asks more specific questions about the role that individual is applying for. Question from Louise about engaging with the recruiting managers. So yeah, as when they first started the process of sort of reimagining their hiring process and their hiring experience, and they gathered together a group of stakeholders, they included hiring managers in that. So they engaged with hiring managers, they consulted with them about basically what worked in the process and also reviewing quite honestly what didn't work in the process. So they brought them through as part of that. First of all, the scoping experience of what do we want to improve within our process, but also in the review process as well of the ATS or the technology. So when they came to do demos, the representatives from the hiring manager community were included in that. So they felt part of that decision-making process. And when they came through to testing, they also included hiring managers so they could test their own experience, review their experience, feedback on what worked, what didn't work. And also that included and extended to the guides as well. So they adopted an initial train the trainer approach, but then they supported that training with guides as well. And they do check in quite a lot. They conduct feedback surveys from the hiring manager community to make sure that the process, but also the system's working well for them as well. John, Jen here. Have you got an example of values-based scored assessment? I'd be happy to share some examples with you after this. I haven't got any to share with you off the top of my head, and obviously they're going to change a little bit based on each individual's company's values, but happy to share some information after this. John, did they have different values questions for different levels of roles? Yeah, they did. I mean, they tweaked and changed those questions depending upon both the area of the organization, but also the level as well. Just making sure I haven't missed any questions. No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I hope the broadband held up okay. I hope you found this session helpful. If you've got any follow-up questions at all, then feel free to get in touch with me. You can just email me at giles@jobtrain if you like, no problem. And next week, we are looking at a session around spring cleaning your technology. It's a good opportunity now, not just because it's spring, to look at your tech. Is it still fit for purpose? Is it still supporting your processes? Are there tweaks and changes that can be made? Is there training that you could take on? Are there features perhaps you wanted to look at and you're not using effectively or you want to use more of? And I'm really pleased to be joined by a client of Jobtrain, Nathan Coleman, who has loads of experience of designing processes, supporting processes, running procurement exercises as well. So he's going to share some of his own insights based on an awful lot of TA and recruitment experience within the education sector. So yeah, looking forward to seeing you all next week. I hope you have a great rest of the week. Enjoy your long bank holiday weekend and let's hope the weather holds up. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.